So, okay, Battle of Cut Knife Hill. This was on May 2nd, 1885, just the other day. The I picked this because it was kind of a suitable time. We all kind of do our own thing in honor of this day that comes every year in order to, I guess, commemorate the memory of Poundmaker people. And to give thanks, because if it wasn't for this, we wouldn't be alive here today. So, Battle of Cut Knife Hill. It's part of the Northwest Resistance of 1885. It's hard to talk about this one without really going into the other events as well, too, right? Like they're all connected in one way or another, and this one in particular is connected with the others as well, and one and like that as well. So I'm gonna see if I can share this. Can you all see that now?
Yeah, that's perfect there.
All right. So in West Central Saskatchewan, Indians and Métis people are historically framed as rebels. So you know, and over 100 years, the books and all the publications and that everything that was written about the Northwest was marked it as being a rebellion. So there was a lot of people that opposed that. That hey, like our people weren't rebels. We didn't rebel. We were resisting an attack. We were attacked, right? So now with reconciliation and of course RCAP was kind of the I guess the start of things and looking at history difference. So they now recognize and people it's more common to hear people say resistance rather than rebellion. So the 1885 Northwest Resistance. So the Battle of Cut Knife Hill is just a story of that resistance. So key names, we have Big Bear. Big Bear was he was looked at as the greater chief of the Plains Cree. And the history with our people here in Saskatchewan, we have to look at Treaty 6, Treaty 4 as being, I guess historically, the territory of the Plains Cree, Wood Cree, Saulteaux, and Nakota peoples. Big Bear was his father was Saulteaux, and but everybody identified themselves as Cree of what they spoke. That's how they seen the world. Of course, you had Palmaker too. Palmaker was one of those that was born out of Mistawash's people, and his father was actually Nakota. And we have Louis Riel. And on the Canadian side, like this is just in the instance of the rebellion. You had Prime Minister John A. Macdonald, you had General Frederick Middleton, and Colonel William Dillon Otter. So here's Big Bear, Palmaker, Riel. I worked on this PowerPoint actually for a couple hours. Like I think I spent about 10 hours looking at stuff, putting it together. So it's not really perfect yet, but I like working on these things. So the major events of the '85 rebellion: Battle of Duck Lake, Frog Lake Massacre, Battle of Fort Pitt, Battle of Fish Creek, and then of course the Battle of Cut Knife Hill, Battle of Batoche, Battle of Frenchman's Butte, and Battle of Loon Lake. So those are all the events that are all interconnected with one another in the Northwest Resistance of 1885. Of course, we're going ahead with the Cut Knife Hill. So Poundmaker, Bitokahan, we say that word, right? Bitokahan, Bitokahan Apiwi. That's the pound maker. That's how you say it in Cree. Bitokahan, Bitokahan Apiwi. Poundmaker's mother was the sister of Chief Mistawashis. And both his mother and her brother Mistawashis, Chief Mistawashis, their mother was Cree and they had a French father. And but Poundmaker, he was orphaned at a young age, and he was taken to Red Pheasant to be raised by his mother's relatives, who she was from Red Pheasant's people. And he wasn't actually like a buffalo pound maker. The original was his grandfather. A lot of it was custom to take the names of people that in our family to kind of, I guess, acknowledge and kind of trace our family roots by taking the names of our relatives that have gone on. So the original pound maker, it was a gifted buffalo pound maker, but he a lot of people think that our people chased the buffalo into the pounds, but it was kind of opposite. It wasn't even that actually. It was they actually sang the buffalo into those pounds. And the gifted part of the original pound maker was that he was a gifted singer, and he had the songs to bring those buffalo into the pounds. They just walk right in. They just and the platform that was built upon there is where he sat and sang those songs to call those buffalo in. Pretty interesting. So when Poundmaker got to a certain age, he became one of the headmen of Red Pheasant under the old man Chief Red Pheasant. But of course, Old Man Red Pheasant, in the early 1800s was pretty old, and he was almost on he was on his deathbed, and Poundmaker asked him who was going to succeed him as chief, and he said that it was going to be Wetney that would be chief. So they Poundmaker didn't really get along with him, and took a leave, and got a number of followers to follow him, and they went and approached the Indian agent to go get a reserve. So again, he was one of the many chiefs of the Plains Cree that recognized as Plains Cree that went and got a reserve and settled on there. But again, in doing so, they divided our nation onto several reserves. So here's Chief Tootoosis, Big Child, and here's Chief Red Pheasant. There's no pictures of Red Pheasant anywhere. There's just the drawing. So 1884. Before we go into the Battle of 1885 or the events there, 1884 was one of the most, I guess, important stories that happened to Poundmaker's people was in 1884. There was a Poundmaker between the reserves of Little Pine and Poundmaker. There used to be Sundance grounds there. There's an estimated 200 teepees there that was counted by Father Louis Cochin, and other people that were witness to that said there might have been over 2,000 people there. So they and both Big Bear and Poundmaker were there. And the thing that happened there was everybody gets prepared. There's all year to prepare. People had to work for their provisions that were being distributed by the farming instructors at that time, and they had a storehouse where they'd give those provisions to people that worked for them. Some of the people that worked for their provisions promised these provisions to other people for their giveaway. And when they went to go get them on that Tuesday, the farming instructor said no way. So after time of asking, one of the men got so frustrated he ended up hitting that farming instructor, saying, he worked hard for that, and there's no way you can, refuse me. And he struck him with the handle of an axe and kind of made him bleed in the elbow. So there was police that were dispatched the next day. They came the next evening, and there was almost a fight, an armed exchange that took place there for an hour, for a couple hours. There was a standoff, and people there were like it just got everybody excited. The warriors there took arms and we're just about gonna, they were threatening, like they said over time and time again, and now is the time, shoot, go for it, do it, and kind of urging each other on, but nobody shot. Good thing. And some of the police that were actually there end up getting their guns stolen. People were counting coup on the side and challenging each other. And one of the challenges was take that gun without getting shot or getting hurt or getting noticed. One of the policemen was actually disarmed by Poundmaker when he came onto the scene. And because him and Big Bear were kind of consulted as the ones to go to resolve this situation. So he made a deal with them that, you know, he's not going to give this rifle back until they distribute these rations or these provisions to the men that are asking for them. And then after that, after the Sundance is done, then you can come and arrest them. So that's what took place. It made big headlines, and Poundmaker got his name out there as being a troublemaker after that. And then the Saskatchewan Herald came along as the propaganda machine for printing articles like that. It was the first newspaper in the province of Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan became a province in the, I think it was 1883. And that's when Regina became the capital after Edgar Dewdney, the lieutenant governor. It was his conflict of interest because he had property, he owned property in Regina, and he wanted to move the capital to Regina from Battleford, so which he did. And but in 1884, there was a lot of I look at it as a propaganda machine, but you know, other historians might relate to it because there's a lot of articles. I did a research project on this before, looking at all the articles in 1884 that dealt with Indians and Métis people, and the articles that were being printed in there were geared towards. It was very right wing, and it was just they were just printed to just gain a lot of hatred from white settlers on Indians and Métis people by characterizing them as being the beggars or being, you know, ungrateful to what white society was giving the Indians at that time. So Poundmaker was one of those that was labeled as the troublemaker, and you know, every time they mention bad Battle River talk, that's in relation to Poundmaker, Big Bear, Little Pine, and the Lean Man. These are the Battle River bands that, you know, we're still referred to as the Battle River bands still today. So again, Saskatchewan Herald, it was like just like the modern tabloids, like printing articles of like stars and making them look ridiculous or making them look good or making them look bad to people. So here's one article that appeared just as an example. The dude here is represented by Big Bear sons who have been driving around in a buckboard all spring. A buckboard is just a wagon. They are got up in the height of fashion as they view it, regardless of expense, but still clinging onto the blanket as a principal garment. One day last week, however, they fairly outdid themselves by turning out with a fine umbrella to save their bronzed visages from further tanning. The absurdity of the thing is greater from the fact that their general costume was the same as they were during the most inclement weather of last winter. So again, ridiculing the people there, and you know, for how they dress and how they look. And then again, Mr. Dewdney, in regards to the Lieutenant Governor Dewdney, notices with satisfaction that whenever he has met the representative men of and the bands, except the two troublesome Battle River ones, they have taken an early occasion to assure him that all the rumors of an intended uprising are unfounded and that they are due entirely to the bad Battle River talk. There are sometimes differences of opinion between the agents and instructors, but nothing so serious to cause any uneasiness. So what was taking place here? When I first read this, I thought, you know, there's other articles in regards to all of a sudden, you know, even Louis Riel being brought up in 1884. Like why like Louis Riel wasn't even a leader at that time, and he was in North Dakota teaching and had nothing to do with any of the movements here. But already in 1884, they started printing articles of Louis Riel, almost as if to taunt him, but they were also, you know, somehow keeping track of every movement here. And the thing is, a lot of researchers have looked at this as the Northwest Rebellion as being a planned and coordinated events that the government took upon to use agent provocateurs to cause the uprising to happen. And the Saskatchewan Herald printing articles like this, setting or for like almost foreshadowing like an uprising, almost a year before, and just added to that. So again, marking out Big Bear already in 1884, saying that he was a fraud and a liar. Already characterizing him as somebody for white settlers to hate. So at this time, we come back to May 2nd. The these are all my photos anyway. I took this the other day. This is the prophecy that our people had at that time. Years before was or the year before, like through ceremony, was that they were told that that you need to be very very careful when the leaves start to poke out next year. This is a time when you need to be very very careful in everything that you do. Palmacres Reserve, for location purposes, I put this map in here. We have North Battleford here, and it's just 45 minutes west of Battleford and 10 minutes north of Cutknife, the town of Cutknife. So and then right beside there is Little Pine, and then Sweetgrass, and then across the river is Thunderchild over here. But Thunderchild used to be actually on this side of the river as well. It used to be right beside Palmacre, right where the current town of Delmas is today. They used to have a big reserve on there, but it got sold. And here's the provinces, the map of Canada at the time in 1885. And you see the province of Saskatchewan here as of after 1883. They broke up the Northwest Territories, and Battleford used to be the capital of Northwest Territories. And they moved they moved the whole provinces right around after that. We have Assiniboia here too. I don't know. It's so confusing to follow the maps. So on May 2nd, on the days leading up to May 2nd, there we had a column of soldiers that were sent from Toronto, and through the train. The Pacific Railway wasn't fully completed yet, but they were able to ship a bunch of soldiers to Swift Current, and under the watch of Colonel Otter, they were dispatched by General Middleton to meet them in Batoche, and they marched north from Swift Current to Battleford. And when he arrived in Battleford, the people there he noticed all the people kind of gathering in the barracks. They're just scared out of their wits of being out on the new plains frontier, where Indians were being rumored to be looting everybody and out to spill blood. There was 2 killings in the Eagle Hills of 2 farming instructors, and that was enough for people to get all scared, and they all moved into the barracks at the fort in Battleford. Colonel Otter arrived, did some investigating, and somehow came to the conclusion that it was Poundmaker and his people that end up looting the town that one night and burning houses as people were in the fort. So he came up with a plan, and he vowed to punish Poundmaker. So he, without approval, he sent a telegram to his general, and he defied his previous orders that he received by telegram to meet to rally in Batoche. And he instead sends his telegram and thinks on his own he's going to take half of the troops of 325 men to punish Poundmaker. Punish Poundmaker is actually just quoted right out of the telegram. So that 325 men are, people always kind of refer to it as just being police, but it was actually, it was actual troops. 75 mounted police, though, under Captain Neal, and 80 B Battery, Royal Canadian Artillery under Major Short. All these 80, the B Battery, the Foot Guards, the General Governor's Foot Guards, and the Queen's Own Rifles, a lot of those soldiers had previous experience fighting in wars in Africa. and also in New Zealand. They were fighting indigenous peoples over there. And then you had 45 Battleford's rifles. 45 Battleford rifles, those are people that had a literal blood vengeance to go and assault Indians. They were just regular townspeople that took the opportunity to volunteer and just wanted to go kill Indians. And the special arms, it was they had the Gatling gun. Canadian government contracted a United States Army reservist named Captain Howard, and it was Captain Howard that was in Connecticut that didn't get approval from the U.S. Army or didn't get special leave. He was just left on special assignment, took his uniform, took the contract, and came up with a Gatling gun and ammunition from the U.S. And this was a 45-70 caliber. And if you ever look at a 45-70 shell, that's bigger than a 300 Winchester Magnum, what people use for killing moose and elk. This is a big, huge bullet, and it's pretty formidable gun. Like the guns that they have for that now, 45 70 Winchesters. They come in Henrys. They're pretty heavy rifles. They don't have the range though, but they are very powerful weapons that can bring down a buffalo in one shot, a full mature buffalo in one shot. But they had 48 wagons. That was enough for to hold them out for 2 weeks of ammunition and stuff to eat and their supplies, whatever they needed. So when I first did this research, I have to say though I'm not relying on a lot of what's printed, but the backbone of my research is the actual oral story that I've heard time and time again growing up. And I've read the information different than other researchers because I know the land and I know the story. And I can make a lot of sense out of just those two things alone that other researchers such as Blair Stonechild. I've actually tried. I've challenged Blair Stonechild in university getting my Bachelor of Arts honors in Indigenous Studies. I had to come up with a thesis that I had to defend, and I went against Loyal Till Death in my thesis because it didn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense, geographical sense. It didn't. The story just absolutely didn't. I didn't buy into it because it was just off. So I did my own. So here's Captain Howard behind the Gatling gun that was brought in. If you see this this big thing, this big structure on top of the Gatling gun, they it wasn't a self-feeding tube. This isn't ammunition right here on the Gatling gun. This was a feeder tube that they put the rounds by box of 45 caliber, 20 at a time, and they all slid into a slot on the other side here. So he wasn't able to operate the gun by himself. He needed a partner to that was good on it with hands to load these the shells into this to slide the shells into the feeder, and then all he had to do is pull the crank and adjust the elevation by degree, or side to side by degree. And they shoot 20 shells in I don't know, like 3 seconds or something like that. So we have Yellow Mud Blanket, Osaw Skilagop. Osaw Skilagop, he was the older brother of Chief Palmaker. He was a society leader of the highest ranking. Today, one of those societies still exists in our community that we still practice ceremonial things with it. And at times of conflict, we change our roles from being helpers, providers, into defenders. And it was this reason that didn't a lot of people, and still to this day, mark Fine Day as being the war chief of Palmaker at that time. But a lot of people don't realize that he was just appointed as security to watch over the people that took refuge with them from the village of Brasiler. So Oso Skiwagup, there's a lot of stories of the two of them, him and Palmaker, always being together and a lot of things that and making a lot of decisions together. More or less because Palmaker was the diplomatic chief and Yellow Mud Blanket was the war chief, and he was also the older brother. But being a society leader, he was the only one that could was able to have in his possession the oskichi, the pipe stem of our people. So during the battle, he was a senior ranking member. He was the one that directed operations and strategized with other society's leaders and coordinating a defense for our people. So two camps were on the reserve at that time. There was a camp of Nakota. Well, they refer to them as the Assiniboine or Stonies, and the Nakota people they didn't really have a large number of members. A lot of people, the majority of the people at that time were Plains Cree, but they were directed to leave and not take part in what was coming. And a lot of people that were part of Palmaker's camp at that time, I mentioned there was 22 people that were from Brasailer. There's a village of Brasailer. Let's go back. Let's go back to this map. Right here is Brasailer. The town of Brasailer is just north of Palmaker, just across the Battle River. And it was this town. It was a settlement. The first three letters, Bree, was Bremner. The family name Bremner. The next three, Sailor, the Say, were the Sayers. And then the last four parts were Taylor. There was three Métis families that came together and they established this village of Brasailer. And they named it Brasailer after their last names. But the farming instructor that was there was named Robert Jefferson, not the U.S. president, but Robert Jefferson was the farming instructor for Palmaker and was formerly the instructor at Red Pheasant. But there was him, and there was also a Father Louis Cochin, a priest that was also in Brasailer at that time that took refuge with Palmaker's people. The other half of the people in that village took refuge in Fort Battleford. They didn't feel safe with Palmaker's people, but went to the fort instead where they felt safe. The other people, the reason why they went with Palmaker was because they were family. They weren't prisoners, and they were actual family because Robert Jefferson's wife was Palmaker's sister, and that's how a lot of people went to visit there all the time in the family, and they had good relations with one another. And it was Palmaker that went to go check on these people personally and brought them back. They came voluntarily. They weren't shackled up or anything. They were treated well, and he assigned people to look after them. He assigned Finde as the head of security, I guess, to look after these people. So Yellow Mud Blanket, Palmaker had to step aside. So here, there's a lot of eyewitness accounts. There's only like really 5 or 6 primary sources for this whole story. All the others are secondary. But Lieutenant Richard Castles was part of the Queen's Own Rifles, and he has a diary. I actually own the book, so. But he mentions in there about 4 p.m. on May 1st, the column starts. There is, of course, no chance of surprising him. His scouts have probably long ere noticed our advance, for signal fires have been burning all afternoon on the distant hills. You can't find this on the secondary works. And I read this and I was like, wow. And I thought right away, the first thing I imagined when I first was doing this back in 2008, I started imagining the Lord of the Rings when they start lighting the signal fires. to warn people of the impending attack, right, and asking for help. But they had scouts all up and down the way from Palmaker to Battleford, and they all had built signal fires to 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 let people know on the reserve when the soldiers were going to leave the fort. And this is they planned this all a week in advance. So when I go back to this, the one word that always stuck out in the book by Stonechild and like in Loyal Till Death was scrambled, and how they made our people look very unorganized, and how we scrambled around like ants out of teepees and everything like that. You know, they went there thinking that they were going to surprise attack people in their sleep, and but you know, how can that be when you know this soldier here is saying they, you know, there's no way we're going to surprise them. We They had signal fires burning all the way up and down. So I took a picture of on Google Maps here. Right here, this little red building here is the historical center on Palmaker. So we're looking northeast. Right here, up and down is northeast. Right around here is the town of Delmas, and way over here is the town of Battleford. So it's about 45 kilometers from Battleford to the historical center. Right in between these roads here is the actual battlefield where the battle took place. This is the hill. Here's another look. We're looking right due east now, and there's a ski hill there called Table Mountain. Here's the town of Delmas here, and then we have the battlefield right here. It's kind of up higher. Town of the village of Gallivan. Here's Highway 40, and here's Highway 16 towards Edmonton, Lloydminster. But the battlefield is right there. Just for an idea, just to get to know the land here now that we have technology to do that. Here's another view with Battleford in the background. And this is the actual picture I took. And you can see the crest of this little hill here is Table Mountains, just on the other side of this little hill here. Now, when everybody comes from Battleford at that time, you know, it was a lot less bushy here because of the buffalo decimated a lot of the bush back then. And it was a lot less, it was more flat. You could see everybody coming from Battleford, whichever way they came on the plains here. You can see really good from this point. It's just a little higher. It's where the monument is. If you've ever been to the historical site, I'm just standing on the other side of the monument, and the battlefield is actually just below this bush here. So before we get to the fighting, there's always this guy mentioned about, you know, Jacob with long hair, Jacob Red Deer. I was told this story by my uncles. We were actually looking for the site that Jacob Red Deer left behind. He was a gifted keeper of a stone that was able to speak. This stone is actually at the Museum of Civilization somewhere, kept in over there in Ottawa, or not Ottawa, in Gatineau. But one of the evenings leading up to the battle, though, this stone talked to this Jacob Red Deer, and he said that if your people don't move to higher ground, you're all gonna die. So so he got the camp crier to announce this, that, you know, his stone left them this warning, and that they need to move. So they actually moved their camp to higher ground, and they left some teepees behind in order to cause a distraction for the soldiers. And Jacob, he stayed behind, and he didn't want to leave. He dug a trench in his foxhole, and he stayed in that camp. So a lot of people back in this was around 2000, might have been actually 1990, 97. I was with my uncles, and we were looking for this place. They knew the story from their late dad, my Muslim's brother Jim, or James Tootoosis. and he talked about this foxhole and directed them where it could be. And we actually went driving around and we actually found it. I actually found it. I almost stepped into it. It was just a hole in the middle of the prairie there, and to this day, that site is now marked with a big iron teepee from, and you can see it from the battlefield. That marks the original campsite. So we have this other guy named James Bird. The spelling of that I'm not sure of because I've just listened to this story that's been recorded, and it might be Jim Byrd Bird, but he was a Métis scout for the Northwest Mounted Police in Battleford, and he was well known for having the fastest horse in the whole district, and he was one of the most reliable scouts that they did have at that time. And, when he was in the offices there that Colonel Otter commissioned, he overheard them talking about the battle that would, or the plans of attacking Palmaker, and he was right in the office when they were discussing that, and they actually hired him to be a scout, but the soldiers didn't know everything. And why I say that is because they didn't know that Jim Bird was actually the best friend of Chief Palmaker. And this is how our people knew that this attack was coming, because this is a week before. And of course, being the best friend, he overhears this, that they're going to go attack his best friend's people. The first thing he did was he got on his horse and he took off and he went and let them know. He told Palmaker, he went straight to Palmaker and told him, this is what's going to happen. Your people got to get ready and they're going to bring me here. And he told him, I'm not going to fight though. I'll stay back, but I gotta do my job. And this is my job. And don't be mad at me after, kind of thing. And he wasn't. So thanked him for doing that, for telling him that. So they were able to get ready. So the engagement. So we already know if anybody wants to stop me, they can just stop me too. Or if you want to take a break from here, is that, anybody need a smoke or anything? Guess not. But after traveling all night, they arrived at Palmaker's Reserve at about 4 a.m. on May 2nd, 1885. They only stopped once. They stopped just by a creek by Table Mountain, and they had lunch during the night, and they kept on going. And of course, they knew there was no chance of surprises because of the columns of smoke. The signal fires were lit from Battleford to Palmaker. The scouts led them to the encampment, and the soldiers then took position on an opposite bluff to the encampment, maybe 200 yards away. We actually took a look over there, and it's about that distance. A Gatling gun was positioned along with the two 7-pound cannons. These two 7-pound cannons had explosive rounds. They'd shoot, and it would be just like a bomb. Like it would explode upon impact. So they took position and they just opened fire. Boom, 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 boom. And then, of course, the big boom of the cannons. And they ordered a ceasefire. And then they examined the teepees that were left there. And, of course, there's nobody there. They approached it, and the only person that they found was Jacob Red Deer, because he dug a rifle pit or a foxhole in his teepee and was safe from the shelling. So they redeployed the scouts, and they went up the hill, and they even seen from where they were, there was two riders that were, they say that are tending to cattle on the hillside, but these were scouts of Yellow Mud Blanket that were taking watch of what was going on while everybody was getting positioned. So the column, military column, then proceeded west to cross the Cutknife Creek. So the main strategy that our people employed at that time was, we'll use the land against them. So Colonel Otter and his troops, they water their horses after crossing the creek. They lost one cannon in the process of crossing the creek. And at 5:15 a.m., almost an hour later, that they just a little over an hour after they first arrived and took shots over there, they proceeded to make their way up the hill. So here's a painting that I found online. It's just um, it's representative of the way things happened. In the distance here, you can see the big hill up here, and that's Cut Knife Hill. That's the real Cut Knife Hill. It was named after a Sarsi chief or Tsuut'ina chief that was uh, that was discovered on this hill by Sweetgrass's people, and was later killed all along with the people that he had with him. His wife was taken and was became a Cree. But this is the battlefield. Um, it was going uphill. So here's some pictures. In 2010, we had a commemoration, and these are some of the pictures that were taken on there. The Fort Battleford National Historic Site has a crew of reenactors that do reenactment acting of historical events, and they brought a cannon with them, and they weren't shooting the guy on the horse. That was just they disengaged the cannon, and the rider just rode across in the smoke of the guns and the cannon. Here's another guy from the reserve that was sneaking up onto the police. So here's the if you're looking due west, if you stand below the battlefield, this is how it looks. Right in the middle of the Poundmakers Reserve, the main road goes right here, right along this bush where this bush used to be. But up here is where the battle used to be, or was at the battlefield was. So right at this X is where the soldiers got. All down here where it says Indians. Indians were in the coulees here and in the bushes here. And then behind where this person was looking that drew this picture is the creek. It was all bushy there too. So when they came up, they came this way following the X's. And the highest that they got was on top of the hill here. And they couldn't penetrate any further. They lost a lot of, they lost another cannon going up the hill. And then that Gatling gun that they had was very useless going up the hill or trying to hit targets uphill. Up on this side of there's another hill that crossed this ravine. This is where a reporter for the Toronto Star that was with the column, doing live reporting, not on TV, but he was kind of journaling everything into a journal. But he said he's seen Chief Poundmaker on this hill directing people with a mirror, directing all the warriors with a mirror, and telling them where to take position and all that. Well, Chief Poundmaker was camped almost a mile away. He wasn't an active warrior in the battle, and along with he was with the 22 people from Brasailer. They were quite a ways away from where the fighting was happening. But that was, if anybody, that didn't know our people at that time, where it was to look at Chief Poundmaker and Yellow Mud Blanket, they looked the same. So here's a Toronto Star reporter, Billy Fox. He said, I was with the ammunition wagon. I can see everything going on in front. And then he was actually hiding under a wagon and taking his reports under a wagon while people were fighting around him. Castles again, he said they had marking their difficulty going across the creek and losing their stuff, and there's not too much stories of this one, and I just learned this one in 2001 after a feast. It was 2001 that marked an important time for people because a lot of people were very hesitant to tell the stories that took place there during the battle because for fear that they'd like my Mushroom's father, John Tootoosis Sr., was an outspoken person, defied the Indian agents, and ended up dead. There was no explanation for his killing. There was nobody brought to trial. Nobody. He just went missing and was found dead later. But the threats were real, and people were very hesitant to even share history. But 2001, people started coming forward. They shared the story of the 11-year-old warrior. He he fought amongst the warriors at that time, and he wasn't. It's not a customary practice. The only reason why they let him was because he kept asking and asking and asking, and finally he just cried because he wanted to fight, and they let him. They kind of they were amused at his persistence, and they let him fight. But they said you have to be with your uncle. So the special conditions, you have to be on the watch by his uncle, who is named the Flying Horse, and he was a relative to the Catan family. But this Flying Horse ended up getting shot while he was running away from the soldiers. He got shot through the back and through the guts. And before he got shot, though, he threw this 11-year-old boy across the creek, and that boy was able to escape. And when he fell, he didn't die. They actually did a ceremony for him, and there was a count of who all got shot. The farming instructor knew him, and knew he got shot that night before. But the day after the battle took place, the farming instructor was doing some investigating of the aftermath of the battle, and seen this man come walking, and it was this Flying Horse that got shot the night before. Looking like he didn't even have any injuries, and but it was the ceremony that they did that night after to bring him back to life and bring him back to health just that quick. There were two Nez Perce warriors there. They came part of people of scouts for Chief Joseph. They were looking for. They were asking people for permission for his people to come in and live or something like that. But these guys got caught up and had no place to go, and were just kind of wandering around after Chief Joseph was captured and taken back into Idaho. So these two Nimifu warriors were part of his people, and they had some wicked weapons with them. One was kind of like a sniper rifle with an octagon barrel. He was actually one of the first to kill one of the Northwest Mounted Police that were present there. Shot him right through the helmet and the head, and his legs flew over his horse because he was doing a demonstration of his rifle. Those two Nez Perce warriors, one fell in the battle there and was buried where he fell, and the other one was found days after the battle. That he died somewhere along the North Saskatchewan River, and nobody knows how he died or what happened to him. So one of the strategies our people had there were appear in great numbers and let them expend their bullets, and don't chase them after they leave. So Billy Fox, he said he mentions how they used dummies. There was only 150 warriors that were able to fight, and there was 325 soldiers that came marching in. So of course their numbers weren't that high. They knew that they'd have to use every method in the book to get them to expend their ammunition, so that eventually they'd have a fair fight in the end. So they make a dummy or put a jacket or something on a stick and raise it up, and the soldiers would fight it or shoot at that. And another report from Castles, the Lieutenant Castles, that mentioned the same thing of the dummies there. So Otter also said that he thought there was at least 500 fighting men. That's how good they were at making their numbers appear great, but they didn't know there was only 150. And then Billy Fox said instead of 200 warriors, we met between 500 and 600. So they exaggerated the numbers because, well, not exaggerated. That's what they thought they ran into. So they thought even Big Bear was there, but he was nowhere near. And it was quite the thing to say that Billy Fox said that, in fact, it would have been a repetition of the Custer massacre, and I think this is too true. They didn't chase them. So the military, they by 11 o'clock, they made their way just on top of the hill, and they met up with another force that they thought was so large that they would never be able to penetrate any further. They lost a cannon at the creek I mentioned before, but they lost another one going up, and again the Gatling was just useless. So the confidence broke in Otter, and at 11 a.m. he called his troops to retreat. They were caught up in a triangular position. The point of the triangle was closing in on behind them, and they had to end up fighting their retreat route. So they focused their energy to fight their way to a retreat to keep the creek clear, so that they're able to cross and get out of there. So Oskitchi, the pipe stem. These are highly decorated items that some of our people have that are used only in special occasions. And it was one of these that were used when the soldiers were retreating. It was held up by Yellow Mud Blanket, and he yelled at the soldiers to not pursue the retreating soldiers. You've done enough. So he held the Oskitchi up, and they respected that, and they didn't pursue the warriors. So a lot of people won't see this in their lifetime. There is a Treaty 6 pipe stem that is still kept with family generation to generation there in Frog Lake. It's kept right outside the house of that person, and I seen it one. I didn't see the stem, but I seen how it's just wrapped in a cloth and with string on each end, and it's just tied and it's hanging on a nail outside the house. And I told my dad, I said, "Hey, well, how come they keep it like that? They're like, wouldn't people go steal it?" And he said, "Well, they did before. But it ends up, back to the keeper every time." So I imagine, like, bad stuff happens to people that stole that, and it ends up coming back anyway. So the aftermath of that battle, there was only 8 dead soldiers and 4 dead warriors. 2 of the warriors they left, or 2 soldiers they left behind, and those soldiers, they were the women did an old practice of removing ears and stuff like that in order for the punishments of the wrong that they did to their people would be carried on to those people on into the afterlife. So the military, they've always, in their official reports, they said there was hundreds of Indians dead. They killed hundreds, and when they got on top of the hill, they said we didn't see any more, so we decided to just leave. That's Otter's report basically. But it was a shameful defeat. When they were packing up what they could, dumping their ammunition and supplies to make room for their injured, there was over 30 or 40 injured. They had to make room for them on the wagons to carry them back, and they dumped their ammunition and supplies to do that. And as they were doing that, their people were laughing, and they were also began to start singing victory songs. And a lot of those soldiers making their way back heard those songs for miles after. And then last year we had reconciliation in action. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came to the reserve there, and he sang. I took this picture. He was right beside the grave there, announcing that the apology and the official exoneration of Chief Palmaker. We didn't want to pardon. It was never our plan. My late cousin Tyrone had worked his life in trying to get this exoneration, and but he never lived to see it. But everybody mentioned his name over there in his honor to see that people, his children, were able to see it that day. So I'm just going to end there. I can go on and on and on, but I'm being respectful of the time. This story is actually better told on the land, so you can actually see. If we stood on the deck of the historical site, we can actually see all the areas I've been talking about, and it's easier to make sense of it. So before giving up, Palmaker said, "You all, as many as you are, behold me. You all call me today your leader. Listen well to what I will tell you. Today there is the question of not fighting, and it matters not either to think of saving your own life. See all these women, see all these children, see all these young people who surround you. They are the ones that we must save. I know that you are brave. In fighting against the whites, you can hinder them very much, but we will yield to their number, and something tells me that our children will have their lives safe. I prefer to surrender myself at the risk of being hung, rather than to shed streams of blood by a resistance which has no more reason to be." So he mentioned that to his troops, and I'll end it right there.